This is Jeff Gallimore from Excella. If you're interested in security and how it relates to software development, modern ways of working, listen to episode 46 of Federal Tech Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. In the studio today, we have Rob San Martin. He's the AVP Public Sector, and Patrick Sullivan, CTO Security Strategy at a company called Akamai Technologies. Today, we're going to talk about security in the federal government and a little topic called FedRAMP Hight. But first, before we begin, we are recording this from Monk's Barbecue in lovely downtown Purcellville. So the real important question is, for Rob first, what are you enjoying for lunch this afternoon?
John, I am a pulled pork guy all the way. I sample pulled pork up and down the East Coast if I can.
Great. And Patrick can walk here from his house. He lives so close. What are you enjoying for lunch?
Yeah, I got to agree with Rob. The pulled pork is the way to go. Also, the Gouda mac and cheese is fantastic.
Wow, Gouda mac and cheese is almost addictive, I think. It's really, really good. Now we got to get serious. The federal government's gone through a lot of changes since COVID. Everyone knows about remote. People are looking at different systems, and I have done over 1,000 podcast interviews with every technology available. Everyone claims to have a product. Now everyone claims to be a platform. It's almost like zero trust. You know, it's like, hey, my name's Randy from Randy Software. We've been doing zero trust for 10 years. Oh, really, have you, huh? Oh, yeah. And so what you have to do is put things in perspective. And I thought we'd put things in perspective today with Akamai Technologies. 20 years ago, when I was writing for the Washington Post, 9/11 happened. And I remember what Washington Post did. They fell back on Akamai to help them cover the load that they had that day. It's a surge in there. And so that's when I learned about Akamai, but it's changed over the years. So I'm going to let Patrick start off, maybe paint the picture of what Akamai is all about, and then we'll dive into the FedRAMP Hight, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Akamai, as you said, has been around for a couple of decades. You know, we're in the business of making sure that the internet is fast, reliable, and secure. And as part of that, we continue to expand what we do into zero trust and segmentation to really continue to meet the requirements of customers as you embrace cloud and other modern technologies.
You know, Rob, when I read about different platforms that are out there, I always think it's kind of stretching. You know, it's like some people maybe can ride 50 or 60 miles and they stretch to a 100-mile ride, you know, and maybe they can't make it or they stop, they quit. And when I think people claim to be a platform, it may be a stretch. And so the word that's normally associated with your company is ubiquitous platform. So why can you claim that?
You know, John, that ubiquity that Akamai brings to the table because of our presence around the world and the delivery platform that we can provide to customers, it's just something that we believe is unparalleled in the industry, and the service that we provide that they take benefit from and that we learn from. That, again, with some intelligence, just continues to modify the behavior on the system and enhance the performance we can bring to customers.
Patrick, I spent a lot of years arguing with software developers and always with a whiteboard. And you always draw boxes and have long things on the whiteboard, and then we talk about hot sauce and go back to the whiteboard. And so if you drew a line of what Akamai Technologies really started as, it was a content delivery network, right? It would be all over the world, and it positioned Akamai to be able to understand what that traffic was doing and where it was coming from. And over the years, they've transitioned. They've leveraged that ability into being more of a cybersecurity focus.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly missed a whiteboard, as we've been, stuck at home with COVID. But you're right. We started sort of as a CDN, and if you think about that, we ended up building sort of inadvertently at first the ideal architecture upon which to build a security platform, right? So if you think about what we did, as Rob mentioned, we have a pervasive set of servers very close to end users or compute, wherever that is. And then what we're doing is we're terminating SSL or TLS these days to look in clear text at each request all the way up to layer 7, as you have to do these days. And in the process, we're gaining intelligence around threats, treating our ability to be in the middle of all that traffic as a giant sensor network. So we understand if there are clients or networks that are more likely to be committing fraud or introducing attack, we can leverage that insight to make a better security decision.
So, Rob, there is a technology out there called a web application firewall, and a lot of people associate that with Akamai. Is that one of your offerings, or how does that fit in the picture here?
It's a component of the offering. So certainly the web application firewall is key in today's quest for zero trust and the security component that's out there. But it's just one of the pieces, as Patrick was talking, in our zero trust offering, right? There's several pieces that we provide in coordination with pieces the customer and other companies provide for a complete solution that helps to solve that problem.
So is this a distributed cloud platform? Is that what we're talking about here?
It's a distributed cloud platform. We think kind of when you reach the level of distribution that we have, that you move into a different category, which we would call edge, meaning that we have a point of presence very close to your compute or your end user, regardless of the network that they come in, whether it's wireless or wireline, where they are around the world. It doesn't matter. You don't need to think about that. There's always going to be a point of presence very close to that end user anywhere they are around the world.
So, Rob, yesterday I had a woman from a company call me and want to come on the podcast. And she good, strong background in software development and security, and she was very proud of herself. Spent the last 3 years trying to get her company on FedRAMP, and she was like at the end of the race. You know, it was the Boston Marathon. She finished it because it was really a big, major accomplishment. And I think a company getting FedRAMP is a major accomplishment. And just tell us what basically that entails, then we'll take it and move it up to FedRAMP Hight.
Okay. It is an accomplishment. The process has improved over the years. We went through it initially probably 5 or 6 years ago. Akamai has a FedRAMP moderate platform, and we're in the business right now of working to submit for a FedRAMP High. The things that have made it more interesting is that I think with the recent budget that just passed, FedRAMP became law, where before it was just a mandate, now it's a law. And I personally believe that within the next couple of years, FedRAMP High is going to become the minimal standard that's acceptable out there. And, you know, the tangential component that businesses that work with the federal government are going to be able to take advantage of, their state and local businesses, the state ramps that are coming out, seems to be that there's going to be some acceptance that if you are FedRAMP accredited already, you're not going to have to go through those state, but that's my impression of what's going on.
You know, Patrick, people ask me, who listens to this podcast? And generally speaking, about 60% of the audience are federal, and 40% is probably other companies. And they say, well, why don't companies listen to this? Because they're constantly looking for people to partner with, or maybe this company has got this one advantage, maybe a service veteran disabled or a certain technology. And it would think that the affiliates in the Washington, D.C. area here might be very interested in Akamai's ability to move up from FedRAMP to FedRAMP High.
Yeah, I think that is very relevant. And as you said, I mean, that's part of an ecosystem that we would participate in. We're obviously looking at strategic partnerships where we can find those. So that makes a lot of sense. So what's the nitty-gritty here? Where is the differentiator, and how is High differentiated from the real FedRAMP? Yeah,
there's an extra set of controls that get put on from FedRAMP Moderate to FedRAMP High. I think it's about 155 controls. And then dealing with the military, the DoD, they're looking for impact level 5, potentially impact level 6, which are accreditations that they hand out uniquely. That's not on the civilian side of the world. The biggest situations you have to deal with are, the data has to be air-gapped. It can't be commingled with somebody else's data. And then there's a requirement for U.S. citizen support for some of that information. A lot of the information is out there. So I'm trying to draw an analogy here. So if FedRAMP is a marathon, then FedRAMP High is a 240-mile run through the desert? Yeah. Is that the difference, or is it a lot harder than that? Yeah, no, if you're starting from zero, going straight to FedRAMP High, there's a big community out there that's developed between the assessors and the advisors that are become very efficient in helping companies steer their way through these things that weren't as prolific when we started this the first time, now make a big difference in steering you what you need, and can you assist you in putting your package together to get it done. The next interview we're doing from Monk's Barbecue is going to be talking about CMMC. And then inevitably, when you talk about CMMC, you're inundated with controls and NIST and everything else. So does NIST play a role with FedRAMP High, or where do they all fit? Is it separate completely? It's commingled together, and then when you get to the CMMC, right, people have been required to do some assessments already and audit yourself to see where you fall, and then are you going to be able to fit into the moderate, or what level of CMMC are you going to have to abide by? There's going to be some challenges there for some companies, especially like ours, that are not exclusively federal. because the commercial side of the business, which is the predominant business, doesn't necessarily meet all of the credentialing that's going to be required. So it's going to be, we'll see how we handle that as it goes forward.
When I first heard of Akamai, I kept thinking of a big unified package. You bought it or you didn't buy it, kind of like that. But from what I've been reading, it seems that there's different separate offerings that are available to other companies you may want to take advantage of. Kind of like at Monk's Barbecue, instead of having a whole dinner, you may want to just have the mac and cheese or something like that.
Yeah.
And so is this important for people who are listening to this, knowing that you can work with Akamai in a different way than maybe they traditionally think?
I think it is. And we've been pivoting over the last couple of years. As you said, John, before, when you bought Akamai, you had to have Akamai to deploy it, to change it, to fix it, to do everything else. Now we have products that are deployable by integrators and by customers. So the ability for us to be combined and to work with influencers to be part of their go-to-market solution and strategy where they can perform the work and we don't have to perform all of it has increased significantly, and that is absolutely the direction that we're moving with the Zero Trust solution and providing those components.
I have to remember my radio days every now and then, and I have to spell out the name of the company. So it's akamai.com, and I'm sure they have a blog there. I don't know if they have a podcast or not, but a lot of information at akamai.com. So, Patrick, you have done a lot of traveling and seen a lot of different things. And so what can my govies learn from all the time you sat in these stupid planes? I mean, that's what they all want to know is that, another 50,000 miles this week, Patrick. So what's in it for me? So what lessons can people from Singapore or from India, from Africa, learn the federal government, especially with Akamai?
Well, I'd say the first thing for the U.S. federal government is, that it's really perceived as a model around the world. I was recently in Singapore, and I think they're seeing the great work that the U.S. has done with CISA as an agency, being proactive, sharing, and other governments around the world are trying to pick up on that. Can we do something similar in our geography? So I think that's an area where the U.S. government is to be commended. I think there are other areas where we see maybe working with technology companies that will move down a path, maybe a little bit as an earlier adopter, that, relative to the government, for example. So I think there we're seeing a lot of focus on securing APIs. As you know, the whole world is kind of shifting to an API first world, and then I think we more focus on software replacing hardware-based, appliance-based solutions. That shift continues to take place. And maybe that's an area where, some of those early adopter companies in the technology space maybe have a little bit of a head start relative to the federal government.
So, Rob, I don't know if you read the executive order that Biden signed this morning, but it's now a mandate. Every time you do a podcast, I have to say zero trust.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's an EO 170-123. Yeah. And the OMB is going to be auditing me, so I have to make sure you say zero. So I have to say zero trust.
You sure didn't say Akamai zero trust, right? It was zero trust. No, it didn't.
So where does this fit in the discussion? Can you help federal agencies achieve that nebulous goal of zero trust, or where do you fit in this whole discussion?
We can. And we have several pieces of the solution that we believe are very credible, whether it is credentialing or whether it's identity, segmentation. We talked about some firewall technology. And in the FedRAMP package that we're putting together, there's platform there that is the underpinning of the offering of zero trust that can be very valuable within the federal system of integrators and solutions.
Patrick, to do my research for this interview, I watched several Jason Bourne movies and some Bond movies, and I learned about what people seal. And they seal the data, okay? They seal the data, okay? That's the whole, everyone's focused on the data. It's got to be encrypted. They seal encrypted data, and it's in thumb drives, and people die over it, and it's data. And you're telling me, no, John, maybe we look at the APIs here. Maybe that is the key to getting to the data. And so when I read about APIs and data, the next topic is going to be quantum. Well, quantum is going to decrypt everything. So if you're sitting in a plane to Singapore again and someone says, well, so what's the priority here? Is it quantum? Is it data? Or is it API? Or how does this all work together? What's the priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I guess depending on who you are, that kind of shapes which threats you need to
be concerned
Jason Bourne
about.
Yeah. But I think, statistically, if you look at sort of the corpus of research on breaches, how do people get breached, it tends to be the more mundane things. It's less James Bond or Mission Impossible hanging from the ceiling. It's an exposed API, or it's somebody has an initial access via phishing or some other technique, and then they're able to leverage kind of the trust that's extended across the enterprise network to move to crown jewels. It tends to be the more mundane things that that break down in the vast majority of cases.
So, Rob, when you look at the federal government today and all the transitions taking place, the CMMC and moving to the cloud and hybrid cloud and all kinds of challenges, what advice would you give a group of federal CIOs if you had them at a barbecue place like this and they said, well, give us 2 or 3 things we can do that's low-lying fruit that we can actually reduce our risk?
I think one of the leading pieces out there, it's not real attractive to talk about, but it's creating an amazing amount of noise and traffic that's not useful, is bot mitigation. There is, we all saw the Taylor Swift tickets that went on there, that we assumed bots were out there that were buying tickets and then busying up the networks for everybody. But it's there. You can create a bot every day. There's a bazillion of them, and it's nonstop. So you're chasing forever. So we would like to offer help there, right? We actually are searching for humans in our bot mitigation, so we think we have a little bit of an advantage there because those are finite to some degree. And then zero trust, it is a journey. People have been talking about it. There is no one product. We do not have the only product, and we do not have the entire solution. It is a partner. It is an elastic partnership between the government and industry to be able to bring all the parts together along with internal procedures so that it can be a useful and successful deployment.
Well, I talked about the executive order that was released today. Well, tomorrow, my good friends at the White House tell me there's another one going to be released. And the new mandate is going to be, every time I talk to Patrick Sullivan, I have to use the word artificial intelligence. Yeah, well, how do you wash your car? I use artificial intelligence to wash my car. Oh, really? How do you get to Pittsburgh? Well, I use artificial intelligence to get to Pittsburgh. And so I guess we have to ask, does artificial intelligence play a role in how Akamai can help my federal audience increase security?
Yeah, so I love the fact that you're being compliant with all these mandates.
I do.
So
I have
good.
to.
Staying out of trouble.
Write piece of paper. Always got a piece of paper and a pen, so you got to comply with that.
Without a doubt. So I think we, in the security industry, have seen the opportunity to leverage machine learning, to keep up with. The reality is you cannot hire enough analysts to continue to look at a screen all day, 24/7. So where you can, you want to leverage machine learning. I think Rob leveraged or mentioned a good area where we had early introduction of machine learning technology. A lot of sort of how we disambiguate a human from a bot is based on machine learning. If we see the mouse movement, the key press, how much does that resemble human interaction versus a bot? Similarly, we sort of have threat hunting capabilities, based on segmentation, where the first pass is machine learning to look for anomalous behavior, and then you have a human kind of refine that and filter that and add their expertise. So it's an ever-growing part of our lives, and with ChatGPT, it's I guess doing the homework for our children and passing the medical exam. I guess recently to be a certified doctor. So it will be a ever-growing part of both our opportunities as defenders, but unfortunately also the available tools that attackers will leverage to write better malware, more compelling phishing bait that they create. So I think both sides of the equation will leverage that technology.
So, Rob, I was reading this morning about ChatGPT, and apparently it costs them $10 million a day to keep the servers running to go through this little experiments they're playing around with.
Wow.
This is a whole lot. And think of the amount of traffic that's going through there. So I'm thinking traffic, got to call up Rob St. Martin for this. He's the traffic guy.
Yeah, we would love to serve that traffic.
Traffic cop in Percival, but on the internet, he's a real traffic cop. So that's where you'd fit in this discussion.
Yeah, we would be more on the. We'd be moving the data back and forth between the application and or the consumers that were looking for it. So we would fit in that kind of FedEx model in the middle, where we take the package and deliver it efficiently to where it needs to go, with the appropriate security that the customer wants to have on it.
Before this interview, we talked about Monk's Barbecue, we talked about a lot of different things, and I referenced a guy named Niels Bohr. And I have to quote him because, I want to impress you with my intelligence, And he said something very, very important. He said, prediction is difficult, especially about the future. And it's too much for me, but I'm going to have two smart guys in front of me, so I'm going to ask them. So I'm going to start with Patrick here. So give me a 5-year plan here. What do you think is going to happen? You think there's going to be an incident and people are going to get serious about this? Or is CMMC going to solve all the problems? Or give me a prediction here.
So I think the right incentives have been set up. If you look at the federal government, all kidding aside, you really have no alternative other than to kind of pursue a zero trust architecture. And most of what zero trust, when you strip away the buzzwords, it's common sense, good first principles. So I think we will continue to see more progress in that direction. I think cloud and APIs we touched on. There doesn't seem to be anything that would suggest that those trends are going to slow down in the future. So I think it's a pretty safe bet that we'll see more of each of those. And that's going to shift the way that attackers try to come at you. So Zero Trust, hopefully the goal there is that 5 years from now when you read a breach report, it's radically different when somebody was successfully breached than really kind of the Groundhog Day of the last 10 years where you could kind of change the year on the breach report and nobody would notice because you're basically saying the same thing year after year after year.
Yeah, I interviewed the people from Verizon about their breach report, and it was same interviews the year before almost. There was nothing new there, but it's good company, and everyone has a lot of trust in that. Rob San Martin, I do see this trend towards looking at API instead of the data. And talking about web application firewall and examining traffic and everything else. So where do you see this in the next 4 to 5 years? Do you think it's going to be more and more focused on that, or is there going to be some unknown chat GPI artificial intelligence? It's the Patrick Sullivan bot that is attacking. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I look at it and talk with friends and family all the time from the perspective of how is it going to affect us and our credentialing or how we get access and what we get access to. I think is going to be noticeable to us. MFA is the most recent one that we do a little bit. We do a little bit of authorization on, but I think that's going to really amp up because the opportunity for attacks and as quick as they can change and the bread trails that they're not leaving anymore to what they're doing is only going to intensify, in my opinion. So a lot of the onerous, I think, is going to shift to the end user to are you really who you say you are and are we going to let you in? And what are those controls going to be? I have no idea. No idea.
When you said edge user, I wrote down edge computing. There's a podcast in town called Feds at the Edge. And so when I think of this whole idea, in other words, if someone is in Utah and they have some data, their choice is do they take and relay that data to Patrick's house in Washington, D.C. and work there, or do they process it there? And I'm thinking, well, if this is the case that's going on, they're talking about this, by the way, in satellites as well. And so edge computing is not just down the street. Edge computing now is in the air. It's in Singapore. It's up in the sky. It's out in outer space. And so it seems like there's some companies that are placed very carefully. They're ubiquitous, and they can understand exactly where all this new traffic is coming from. So Patrick Sullivan, edge computing should be your sweet spot.
Without a doubt, yes. So I think the way that we want to approach this is to give developers options, right? There are, to your point, there's some compute process that should exist very close to the end user. That's optimal. There are other forms of compute that are very, very heavily tied to a centralized database, and it probably makes more sense to run those in a less distributed capacity. But I think if you look at modern development practices where you've got microservices and you're decomposing those applications, I think where we want to end up as developers, as part of their planning process, figuring out where each microservice should run. Some are going to run on the edge, some are going to run centralized, and they'll optimize based on that, given the choices that are available to them.
Microsegmentation. Data centers now are talking about microgrids, and it's really becoming very edgy, but that's really what's going on. It's a lot of things are at the edge. Just because it's a data center doesn't mean it can't virtually connect to another data center where the traffic's going to have to be inspected and careful. It's got to be secure.
That's right.
This has been a very interesting conversation. You've been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Rob San Martin, AVP Public Sector, and Patrick Sullivan, CTO Security Strategy at Akamai Technologies.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.